Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Borys Tizengauzen. Today there will be an unusual and interesting issue, and we'll start with this. Dmitry Medvedev accused the West of wanting to introduce killer plants and dangerous microbes into Russia. So if you thought the topic of Biolabs, the USA, and the treacherous West was closed, you are very much mistaken. It's only just beginning. There are new talking points in Russia. How exactly does the West want to destroy them? And in this episode, new epidemics, poisoning of the water in the Black Sea, secret plans by Western intelligence agencies to wipe out the Slavic ethnicity, and even Dmitry Medvedev personally. All of this will be in this episode. I've put together such a collection for you, you won't believe it. And yes, the Russian army really could face a serious epidemic in the near future, but the reason will be completely different. Not planted microbes, and certainly not plants. So, what did Dmitry Medvedev say? He said that dangerous microbes and plants are what the West could use to harm Russia. Unfriendly states could deliberately introduce dangerous types of plants and microorganisms into Russian territory. He made this statement not just anywhere, but during a meeting of the Interdepartmental Commission of the Security Council of the Russian Federation on countering modern threats to biosafety. Listen, this is just astonishing. You see, Russia has been looking for these American biolabs everywhere. They diligently searched for them extensively in Georgia, in Armenia, in Kazakhstan, and also in Ukraine. Do you want a helpful hint? Don't you want to look for them somewhere in the east, in China, perhaps? Well, for example, don't you want to start with the Wuhan area? And why not? Is it scary, perhaps? Or maybe Xi Jinping showed Putin at the parade why you shouldn't look for anything or even ask questions. After all, no one has ever seen those so-called Ukrainian or Armenian combat mosquitoes. But the whole world has felt the consequences of COVID. Millions of deaths. And by the way, no one has been held accountable for this to this day. But let's get back to Medvedev. And there, in general, this is something new, a whole new layer of Russian propaganda, deliberate sabotage against the Russian Federation. In short, Medvedev said that there will be full-scale exercises held in mid-October in Tajikistan. These are the CSTO peacekeeping forces exercises called Indestructible Brotherhood 2025. These are special exercises that will involve joint formations for radiological, chemical, biological protection and medical support. In other words, during the maneuvers, they plan to work on tasks related to eliminating biological threats. You know, the thing about all this, it just sounds kind of wild. But if Russia starts talking about a dirty bomb that someone supposedly wants to throw at them or plant, then believe me, it means Russia is preparing it themselves. That's why there is such intense attention to threats supposedly against Russia. In reality, we understand that they strictly follow Goebbels' traditions. Accuse your opponent of what you intend to do yourself. And of course, Medvedev hasn't come up with anything new. He just used an old Soviet playbook from the Cold War era. You'd be surprised at how similar the talking points were then and now. And by the way, the same countries were on the stage in the same clubs. And do you know who was used as a propaganda tool in the USSR? Colorado potato beetles as a tool of propaganda. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union claimed that the CIA had infected the agricultural lands of Warsaw Pact countries with Colorado potato beetles to destroy their crops, and that American pilots were supposedly dropping these beetles from airplanes. In the 1950s, the East German government claimed that the Americans had dropped these potato pests over their territory, and everything was staged perfectly. Even the date, somewhere in May 1950. A farmer with a specific name and surname noticed how 2 American planes were circling over a particular village. The next morning, that was it. Everything was swarming with Colorado potato beetles, destroying the potato crops and so on and so on. Although this beetle was first described back in 1824, and it made its way to Europe at the end of the 19th century. But of course, the Americans supposedly scattered these beetles. So now Medvedev is doing exactly the same thing. Oh, Soviet propaganda really hyped up this topic, you can't even imagine. The beetles were called, I looked at the posters from that time, 6-legged messengers of imperialist aggression. These beetles, these so-called six-legged messengers, thousands of brochures, posters, and propaganda materials were printed depicting the beetles in the colors of the American flag, dressed in American uniforms. They were called Yankee beetles. In general, the press of socialist Germany wrote about numerous cases where first an American plane circled overhead, and then supposedly whole clouds of Colorado beetles would appear. In short, these six-legged messengers of American aggression were even mentioned in a report by the East German government about the criminal attack of American imperialist militarists on the country's food supplies. And so it began. Just so you understand, this is all history, this is no joke. A real mobilization began. School children and students in East Germany were driven out to the fields, and they collected these Colorado beetles in buckets. By the way, I was also sent to the dacha as a child. I also collected those Colorado beetles there. The worst, the most disgusting, were those larvae. They were so soft, just revolting. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Things are about to get really wild. Subscribe, especially if you also have stories about dacha terrorism. Like when your parents suddenly decided that instead of the sea or the yard, you needed to pick raspberries. Subscribe, we'll remember everything. So in general, nothing has changed since then. We've already heard about biolabs and mosquitoes that supposedly infect only selected Russians. Actually, these secret US biolabs, that was an entire active layer of the information war back in Soviet times. During the Cold War, Soviet propaganda never stopped talking about these biolabs either. In the 2010s, already in the 2010s, Russia started looking for them in Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Georgia. But there was a particularly interesting case involving the Soviet Union and these biolabs. From the year 1949 to the year 1988, there were precisely 10 minor and 3 significantly large-scale campaigns directly connected to these biological laboratories. Moreover, the powerful Soviet Union meticulously carried out these extensive campaigns with the full and unwavering support of both North Korea and the People's Republic of China. At that time, the communist countries accused the United States of using biological weapons during the Korean War. As they say, the same old game is still being played to this day. But here's an interesting case. Already in 1988, it became known that the Soviet Union itself put an end to this first major campaign of, oh no, the USA, biological weapons, biolaboratories. Here's what happened. Stalin died, and 2 rival groups, Khrushchev's group and Lavrenti Beria's group, were looking for ways to discredit each other. Beria accuses a man who is Khrushchev's protege, Semyon Ignatiev, of having concealed from the public documents showing that China, as far back as 1952, I remind you, this is already happening in 1988, or rather, it became known in 1988. He was accused that back in 1952, China had confirmed that all these accusations against the United States were fabricated. That's how it was. The internal political struggle revealed that naturally all of this had been invented by the Soviet Union. But the second large-scale campaign unfolded already in 1982. Then the Soviet authorities accused Pakistan of developing a secret weapon, naturally with the assistance of the United States, based on a laboratory that is researching, guess what? Malaria. And look, in the Literary Gazette back then, in 1982, an article appeared that claimed that Pakistani laboratories, using CIA money, were breeding genetically modified killer mosquitoes. Doesn't that remind you of anything? And now here's a news story from October 28, 2022. By then, Russia had already invaded Ukraine, and Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, stated that drones had been found on Ukrainian territory that were supposed to carry mosquitoes infected with diseases. And he said this directly at a UN Security Council meeting. Basically, in Ukraine, there were projects being carried out to study the spread of infections through migratory birds and bats. They were supposed to fly into Russian territory, kill everyone there, and infect everyone. By the way, after these crazy news stories, pardon my French, some Russian pensioners actually started poisoning birds. They thought these were, messengers sent from Ukraine to infect them with various deadly diseases. And besides that, in March, Russian troops found on the territory of Ukraine special drones of a different configuration. These were supposed to be loaded directly into compartments with these mosquitoes, and then the drone would fly, and deliver them to Russian territory. So, all of this, I remind you, all this nonsense. Nebenzia in 2022 said it right from the podium, and people were sitting there in the UN Security Council listening to this attentively. And here's something else for you. How do you like this historical parallel? In 1985, information was spreading that the US and South Africa were working on creating a bomb capable of killing only black people. And similar information was spread about the US and Israel, that there was a special bomb that would only kill Arabs. Putin's people decided not to bother and just completely repeat all the same talking points, only replacing them with Ukraine. So the main enemy, of course, is the US. And what's interesting is that the topic of biological weapons targeting a specific ethnicity started being raised again in Russia immediately after the annexation of Crimea. It's important who started bringing it up. In 2015, the head of the Kurchatov Institute, Mikhail Kovalchuk, gave a lecture on genetic weapons at the Federation Council, talking about such developments. There he began to explain, a single cell that has a genetic code is a weapon of mass destruction, and so on and so forth. He said that it is possible to create something that would kill a specific ethnic group. It could be harmless for one ethnicity, while another ethnicity would simply disappear. So this Kovalchuk is none other than the brother of billionaire Yuri Kovalchuk, the head of Rosia Bank, and both of them have been longtime acquaintances of Putin. And in 2018, Putin himself brought up this topic at the Valdai Forum. He claimed that supposedly some kind of bacteriological weapons development was taking place in Georgia. How many times do you need to be told? In 2019, Russian experts were given completely unrestricted access to laboratories in Armenia that had been equipped with the help of the United States. At that time, Armenia said that another campaign about US Biolabs had started in Russia, and they said, "Come in, check for yourselves." Moscow, after all, suspected that there was some kind of terrible weapon there. Well, Moscow could always do that, and as we can see, used it as one of the arguments for invasion. That's why Armenia said, "Come to the facility, take a look." Russian experts came, but found nothing. There were some obvious inconsistencies, just purely logical ones. Well, just imagine, even now some die-hard Russians still call Russians and Ukrainians one people and so on. So how were mosquitoes supposed to distinguish between ethnicities? How were they supposed to tell Ukrainians from Russians? What do you think? Were they supposed to ask them for documents or something? What were they supposed to do if they flew back to infect everyone there? In short, it's complete nonsense. I think you understand perfectly well, but Russian propaganda operates not only by Soviet manuals, but also by those very manuals from Nazi Germany. It's no coincidence that Goebbels once said that the more monstrous the lie, the easier it is to believe in it. But that's not all. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense has claimed that supposedly Russian occupiers in Ukraine have found evidence of Americans working with smallpox pathogens. Can you imagine? And they announced all this, just everything thrown together. Dirty bombs, smallpox, mosquitoes, birds, and bats. So look over there to the east when it comes to birds, bats, and everything else. So the one making these claims was Igor Kirillov, the head of the radiological, chemical, and biological defense troops of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. He said, "We found manuals there for American instructors on how to train our instructors, how to work with these smallpox strains. Well, basically, they printed them out on purpose and left them behind." And here's another masterpiece. This one is brand new, that supposedly we want to infect people here with cholera, typhoid fever, and so on. But this Kirillov, are you wondering where you've heard that last name? That's the very same General Kirillov who was killed by a scooter. Remember the story when General Kirillov went outside, the scooter exploded, and there was no more General Kirillov. He was eliminated right in Moscow. Neither his security detail nor anyone else could save him. In short, he rode his scooter all the way to hell, which is exactly where he belongs. For these kinds of fabrications, you see. And another Russian theory is that we were supposed to pour something into the Dnipro, or better yet, closer to the Sea of Azov, or even straight into the Black Sea. And this something was supposed to distinguish between ethnicities and kill Russians somewhere in Anapa, Gelendzhik and Sochi, but not touch Ukrainians in Odessa. And all of this is all, as they say, delivered with a straight face by Russian experts and some Russian politicians. But don't forget, the main enemy is the USA, it's the USA. Well, in general, I think everything is clear as it is. Now, as for all sorts of epidemics and various terrible diseases like plague or typhoid fever, all of that could very well happen, but for completely different reasons. Today I came across a very interesting unconventional theory about how this war might end. The essence of this theory is as follows. Due to the catastrophic situation with water in Donbas, and naturally the accumulation of garbage and sewage, with extremely unsanitary conditions, a real epidemic could break out, which could in one way or another bring this war to an end. That is, there have been cases in history when epidemics have ended wars. For the understanding of viewers of the English language channel, after the occupation of Donbas in 2014, the issue of water supply by the Russians was never resolved. So in Donbas, the water situation in Donbas kept getting worse and worse. In 11 years, no one did anything. This is the very Donbas that Putin came to save, and his rescue resulted in some cities standing in ruins, and not only have enormous problems with water begun, but also truly with diseases as well. In some settlements in Donbas, water is supplied only once a week, and in some places these huge water tanks come by. People line up in queues just to get at least a little bit of this water. What kind of sewage system can we even talk about there, or washing dishes, doing laundry, and so on? People are just hoping to have at least something, even a little bit. So Putin has money for the war, but not for a water supply system. So if this situation continues for a few more months, yes, winter is coming, temperatures will drop below zero, and all of this will freeze a bit, all these wastes that are accumulating. But when spring comes, when the temperature starts to rise, I can hardly imagine what will happen there. And I am sure that during this time, Putin will not solve the water supply problem there. So Putin has, quite literally, brought the occupied Donbas back to the Middle Ages with all the consequences that come with it. So maybe there will be an epidemic, but it definitely won't be caused by mosquitoes or any kind of weapon. It will be caused by the fact that Putin is an idiot. That's what will provoke this epidemic. Meanwhile, Medvedev is coming up with yet another fairy tale about killer plants supposedly being sent to him from the hated West. By the way, I think that for Kremlin propaganda at that level, they don't even need to come up with any special stories. I mean, you can just take clips from old horror movies, really old school ones where, I don't know, a hand in a green stocking played some kind of killer plant and it would kill a doll like this, just like that, and pretend it was a person. So just use all those shots. Russians will believe it, don't worry. By the way, with Medvedev definitely has a plant killing every day. Or more precisely, his tincture if we're talking about hawthorn. But in reality, we can see that the Iron Curtain is reappearing. Soviet manuals are resurfacing. Or rather, they never really disappeared. Now they are just actively, obviously, back. The very same countries that used to help the Soviet Union are now helping the Russian Federation. Although, you know what the key difference is? At least for me. I can't imagine that during the Cold War, anyone from the Politburo would have bought themselves a villa in the hated West. Well, it was impossible, simply impossible. And indeed, the curtain was iron. That is, people could only travel abroad with special permission. But now, surprisingly, many Russian officials are quite happily and openly buying luxurious real estate properties in various Western countries. Their wives and mistresses make purchases in the West. Their children study in the West. So it's only for ordinary Russians that they throw a bone into the kennel and say, look, the scary West, Biolabs, oh no, it's so frightening and so on. But as for us, we'll actually be vacationing there. That's just how it is. They will keep waging wars all the time. Russians will be constantly at war. They have no other choice. That's how things are set up in their country. That's how the country is built. Just look, besides weapons, are they able to produce anything from civilian goods? Weapons are military, but can they produce anything civilian on their own? I don't know, maybe cars, maybe some smartphones, maybe some kind of electronics. No, nothing. That's just how their country is built. This is the legacy that Putin has carried on. Well, it's not exactly a planned economy, but basically, we can't make anything decent for civilian life. We can only churn out weapons. That's why everything is geared toward war. This one, the next one, and whatever comes after. That's why they need to be dismantled piece by piece together. The peoples should be released from the prison of nations. Russia must fragment and become small enough that it no longer poses a threat. Only then, yes. And of course, the issue of nuclear weapons will have to be resolved afterwards. But it seems to me that both the Russians and their dictatorial clique have now reached such a point of no return that no one will allow them to be dismantled anymore. I mean, I would have doubted this at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when it was still possible, when the Russians were later being driven out of Kherson, driven out of the Kharkiv region. They needed to be finished off then. But back then, someone put a stop to all of it. At that time, someone flew to China and said, no, we won't allow Russia to be finished off. Even though there was a chance. But let me remind you, friends, the front is now being held solely thanks to the heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. And let me remind you about our important fundraiser for the separate Boden-Khmelnytsky brigade, which is now fighting in the Pokrovsk direction, one of the hottest spots. They are the ones liberating Donbas from the evil that came there. Right now they are in great need of the transport we are raising funds for. Every donation you make can truly save the lives of our defenders. Let's help them. We don't have much left to finish this fundraiser. Believe me, they are really waiting for this transport. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. The link to the fundraiser is also in the comments. There is mono, there is private, and if you're watching me not on my channel, here's a QR code that leads directly to this fundraiser. There's also a PayPal link in the description for those who want to help from abroad. A lot of our defenders are reaching out to me now. Well, we've become known for helping here and there. Requests are coming in from different units, and I'm sorry that I can't help all of you. Right now, there's already a whole line of fundraisers waiting. I don't know how to help everyone, but we will really do our best. And from the bottom of my heart, I sincerely thank the viewers of this channel who take part in the fundraisers and help our defenders. You are doing a great thing. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves, friends, and take care of your loved ones. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.